Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Germany once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a number of times before. Now, when it comes to this brewery, these guys are very special to me personally. It was this brewery's beers that really got me interested in beer and thinking about it a little bit more, and it seems that they're going to be experimenting a little bit more and releasing more and more different beers over the next wee while. So yeah, I'll need to keep an eye on what's going on at this brewery, in fact. But these guys are from a very famous brewing town in a very famous brewing region of Germany, and they're arguably the most famous and well-known brewery from that particular city. And the beer itself is one of their latest releases. They've got 2 new releases, which is quite exciting for these guys, and it's quite different compared to what we've had from them before, in fact. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to the state of Bavaria in the south of Germany. We're going to go to the northern part of that state, which is called, it's a historic region called Franconia, or Franken in German. We're going to go to a little bit to the northeast of Nuremberg, the biggest city in the area, to Bamberg, a very, very famous beer town, and we are going to return to the wonderful Brauerei zum Heller, as they're known, and have a look at one of their Schlenkerla beers. So this particular beer is called Aecht Schlenkerla Weichsel. It comes in at 4.6% ABV, and this one is a Rotbier, which has been smoked using a cherry wood fire. So yeah, this should be quite interesting. Now, I haven't reviewed too many Rotbiers or red beers, as they would be known on the channel. It's a style that was quite popular in Nuremberg apparently, and it's only in the last maybe 25 years or so that it's been kind of resurrected in the city. So I need to get down to Nuremberg at some stage and have a little look at some of these beers. But Rotbier is a style that you really don't see all that often. So quite interesting to see that Schlenkerla are the guys at Schlenkerla are brewing a Nuremberg Rotbier and then smoking it with cherry wood, in fact. So yeah, not something I would have expected from them at all, in fact. But they have very recently also released a beer called Erle, which is a Schwarzbier. So we'll need to check that one out at some point when we come across it too. But a big shout out in this video to Matt Dapkins of Massive Beer Reviews. He bought a 4-pack of these here in New Jersey, and he said I could review one for you. So that's what I'm doing. I'm filming in his spot, in the Massive Beer Review spot, when I do this one. So it was really cool to come across this beer, actually, because I love Schlenkerla. It was the Märzen that really kind of started me off on my whole beer journey. So whenever Schlenkerla release something new, I'm always very, very keen to try it. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then. So like I said, this one comes in at 4.6% ABV, the Aecht Schlenkerla Weichsel. Aecht, of course, is original in German, but let's crack on and see what this beer has in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brauerei zum Heller Bamberg, or the Schlenkerla brewery if you want to give them their more anglicised name. We will add to that in the near future should we get the chance. But if you do want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the German playlist along with a number of other things, and we will no doubt add to that list as time goes on. But you can check out the playlist of beers from other countries, which I recommend you do, because there are a number of very interesting things on the channel these days. So yeah, do check that out. But let's get cracking with this one and see what the beer is going to have in store for us. So on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a wee bit about Brauerei zum Heller Bamberg, if I remember the official brewery name right, but the Schlenkerla Brewery. So, the Schlenkerla Brewery is located in the historic town of Bamberg in Franken, in northern Bavaria in Germany, which is just to the northwest of Nuremberg. So Nuremberg is really quite a cool city actually when you go there, because it was largely untouched during the Second World War, so it has a lot of the original buildings, but there's a lot of wineries and monasteries around there which you can go and visit as well, and the brewery is located right in the centre of the old town, and it's very famous and well known throughout Germany and the rest of the world. But the brew house itself is on Dominikaner Straße, if I'm accentuating that right, and the brewery was neighboured by a Dominican monastery, hence the name Dominikanerstraße. But the history of the tavern actually started with the formation of the Dominican monastery back in the 14th century, and the first mention of a brewery is in the year 1405. But the brewery building was apparently sold a number of times between 1405 and 1615, and during the 30 Years' War, which was 1618 to 1648, the building was destroyed and rebuilt. But this brewery was founded in the year 1678, and before this year the reports are scarce, but there is far more documentation after this year, so they do tend to refer to 1678 as their foundation date. But since 1678 there have been numerous owners of this brewery. One of the very important owners is Johann Wolfgang Heller, who took over the brewery in the mid-18th century, and he owned an old rock cellar which is used for beer storage up on the Kalberg Hill, which is just outside of Bamberg, and this storage facility was later moved to Stephansberg Hill, which is actually inside of the city limits today. But over the course of the 19th and 20th centuries, the brewery has moved, the brewery was kind of gradually moved to the location just above these ancient cellars in Stephansberg. But in 1877, Andreas Graser became the new owner of the brewery, and he had a slight kind of physical handicap actually, and his arms moved about in an odd way as he walked, and of course in the Franconian dialect this was known as Schlenk, or Schlenkern. And so the brewery kind of gradually became known affectionately as Schlenkerla, and that's what they use on their beers today. But the official name of the brewery is Brauerei zum Heller Bamberg, if I remember correctly. But in 1907, Andreas Graser's son Michael took over the running of the brewery, and by this time more and more people were visiting the brewery, and they actually leased a part of the former monastery from the Bavarian government, who had become the owners during the course of the secularization process. But in the 1920s, the buildings in Dominikanerstraße, the chapel of the Dominican monastery, these were being restored by the Germanic Museum of Nuremberg in the 1920s. And then in 1960, this restored part of the tavern was bought from the government by the company, and Michael Graser's daughter Elizabeth and her husband Jakob Trum took over the running of the brewery. So it stayed in the Graser family for a few generations now. But in 1967, they passed the brewery down to their son German Trum, and over the years they've continued to modernise the brewing facilities. They've opened new rooms within the Brauhaus. They've got a beer garden there as well, which you can go and look at. And this, of course, is in what was the former yard of the monastery. But in recent years, the facade of the Brauhaus has been modernised, and the famous ceiling pit painting of the monastery has been restored. And in terms of brewing, they've continued to experiment with new styles, develop new beers, and release new things. And as I've said, in Germany it's quite an exciting time just now, because so many of these like really old school breweries such as Schlenkerla are trying styles that they've never brewed before. These guys are brewing a Nuremberg Rotbier, and they've got a Schwarzbier now as well, which is quite interesting. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Brauerei zum Heller Bamberg, or the Schlenkerla brewery, or whatever you want to call these guys. Like I say, this is a brewery that is quite special to me, because they got me into beer and thinking about different beers, but it is pretty unusual from a beer lover's perspective to get interested in beer because of smoked beer, because these things are usually pretty damn saturating, and they've got a really strong flavour. But that's just how it happened for me. I'm a weirdo, why not? But yeah, as I say, that's everything I can really tell you about these guys. If you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about but all the different beers that these guys have released. So yeah, let's go on and have a little look at the beer itself. I'll just let you have a wee look at the label of this one before we open it up. You can see it is quite similar actually. It reminds me for the most part of the Schlenkerla Eiche Doppelbock. The artwork on this one is quite similar because you've got that dark, rich character there, then the kind of gold trim on it. You can see Andreas Graser there on the label. He was the one, of course, who had the little walking stick and things. So there is the whole idea behind the Schlenkerla name. And then you've got the bottle cap as well, which, well, this is quite an interesting one. This is a bit different. It's just a plain gold one. Usually they've got a little bit of kind of colour to them. But it says on the back here, Schlenkerla, the historic smoke beer brewery, for our Aecht Schlenkerla Weichsel red lager. We dry them all over a fire made of high quality cherry wood instead of beech. Cherry wood has a fruity, sweet aroma and provides a copper red colour. The finest aroma hops add berry notes to the full-bodied, pleasantly palatable beer, 4.6% ABV. As one of the last traditionally made smoked beers, Aecht Schlenkerla Brauhaus is a passenger in the arc of taste by slow food. Yeah, this is quite interesting. It does actually have the American label on it, this one. They've obviously got different labels for when this beer is sent out to different places. But yeah, nicely presented as you always get from Schlenkerla. But let's get this beer out and into the glass and see what it's all about. I do know that you would, in Germany, you would drink this beer in more of a kind of tall pint glass type thing. But yeah, I do like the tulip glasses for tasting, so that's just me. But yeah, the Aecht Schlenkerla Weichsel, 4.6% ABV. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. So, a little bit of smoke on the opening there. Let's taste this one. Let's do this. Very excited for this. Ooh, that does look very nice. We've got maybe about 3/4 of the beer out and into the glass now. But this looks very, very nice. As I mentioned to you earlier, the Rotbier is a style that comes from Nuremberg in Germany, which is probably the capital of that Franconia region. But you can see that when we poured most of the beer, it came out with about a half finger of a frothy, I would say, kind of cream fawn coloured head. That's faded away to be a very thin foamy layer. You've got a thicker ring just around the edge of the glass there. And you can see it's got some nice kind of medium sized bubbles there on the surface of the liquid, and it gets a little bit more kind of, yeah, it gets a little bit more sort of foamy the further up the head that you go. And you can see the colour of this beer. This light that Matt has, it's really good actually. You can see that this beer has a lovely kind of rich, I would describe it as like a rich bronze kind of coppery colour in fact, and it's crystal clear, this one, which is, I think that's a little bit unusual for the Schlenkerla beers. If I remember rightly, a lot of them tend to be, a number of them tend to be kind of unfiltered and things like that as well. But yeah, it has this lovely kind of rich coppery, unstained, and yeah, unstained mahogany is probably a good way to describe the colour of this beer too. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it looks pretty nice, this one. Kind of what you would expect from a red beer, as they're called. And this one is technically a lager, as we've mentioned. So remember, the definition of a lager beer is a beer that ferments using a bottom fermenting yeast at low temperatures. So, yeah, I think we've said everything we need to about the appearance of this one. Let's have a wee look at the aroma and see what this beer is all about. Oh yeah, this one smells absolutely lovely. You can really smell the difference. Like, you know when you smell this, you know it's a Schlenkerla beer, just because of the way the smokiness comes out and how, you know, saturating the smoky character is. But it just has a little bit of difference to it. Of course, in Bamberg you have a few other, in the Bamberg area you have a few other smoke beer breweries such as Spezial, who are great, but their beers are nowhere near as smoked as the Schlenkerla ones are. And you've also got Bayern, who are fairly close to, do some great beers, but again, nowhere near as kind of big and bold as the Schlenkerla ones. But yeah, this beer smells lovely. Let's just describe this aroma for you a wee bit more in depth before we taste the beer. So for me, you can really smell the difference in the wood. The backbone of this beer, you have that lovely, you can smell it's the woody character in this one. It just isn't quite as dry as you get in the other beers. It's got a lovely kind of smoothness to it, and as they're saying, the kind of fruitiness that you get from the wood is really interesting as well. So yeah, you've got this smooth, you've got this kind of smooth, dry woody character in there. It has a little tiny hint of vanilla to it, which is interesting. There's a little bit of a vanilla character within the wood, but as I was saying, the cherry wood is really giving you this very bright, slightly kind of fruity, almost like blackcurranty type character. And then on top of that, you're getting all the things that you would normally associate with a Schlenkerla beer. You're getting all the breadiness and the brown sugar and the smoke and things like that. So yeah, this for me is really interesting. This would be very interesting to try on tap actually at the brewery. Yeah, for me the way that this goes together is really, really interesting. It's absolutely lovely. Yeah, so let's just break the aroma of this beer down a little bit then and put it more in depth from the other side of stuff. So above the woody character, you do get a little bit of a bread crust. So for me, it's a kind of, it really has this sort of kind of toasty, slightly well-fired, rye bready bread crust. That's what sits above everything else on the yeah, that's what sits above everything else on the woody side of things. So yeah, you get this kind of toasty, slightly well-fired, like rye bready bread crust. There's a kind of rye bready character in there, a sort of sweeter rye bready character. Then on top of that, you have a little bit more. On top of that, you've got a little bit more of a kind of sweeter, kind of like German pumpernickel bread. And the smoky character that you get out of this one, the smokiness is almost like embedded within these bready layers, actually. Yeah. So within that kind of rye bread and like pumpernickel bready layer, you've got this smoky character in there. And as I've mentioned many a time, when it comes to these German Rauch beers, the smoky character is often more meaty compared to the smokiness we get back home in Scotland, which is more kind of peaty. It's like a more grassy, earthy sort of smoky character. So yeah, you've got that smoky character embedded within the bready notes in there. Then you've got a toasty, brown sugary character coming out of this one. So yeah, toasty brown sugar in there. It's got a little bit of like a dry, leathery kind of caramel to it as well. Then in the dead centre of the nose, you have got a little bit of a sweet caramel coming out of this one, which is quite interesting. A little bit of biscuit as well, I would hasten to add. But yeah, I think that covers everything we need to say about the malty side of the beer. The only other thing we could add is that there is potentially a little bit of nuttiness coming out of the. There's a little bit of nuttiness coming out of the malt base here too, which is absolutely lovely. Yeah, I think we can go on to the kind of hoppy side of things then. The hoppy side of the beer is kind of what you would expect. It's got a little touch of earthiness to it, so there's a little bit of a smooth earthiness in there. You've got a nice wee bit of a kind of herbal character as well. So yeah, nice little bit of herbal note in there, a little touch of floral character, then a bit of a wetter kind of grassy note coming out of the beer too, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything more we need to say about the thing. It's kind of typical Hallertauer Tettnang German hops that are coming out of this. And on the fruity side of things, it's kind of what you'd expect. As I say, there's a little bit of blackcurrant in this one from the wood. You've also got you've got quite a little bit of oily pear coming out of this beer, which is what you'd expect. So oily pear. Oh, I think yeah, a little bit of blackcurrant from the wood, and then for the most part, as I say, a bit of an oily pear and like a very, very dry apricot or something like this. It's quite hard to pick out fruity characters in this beer, to be honest with you. But as I always say, take a little bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time for us to try this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, we'll get a little bit more foam on it, we'll sugar it up, and we'll have a taste of this. This one is the Aecht Schlenkerla Weichsel, a 4.6% Nuremberg style Rotbier from the Brauerei in Bamberg, smoked with cherry wood, which is a bit different. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. That's interesting. First impression of this beer is that it has a real dryness to it, actually. Yeah, this is interesting. As I say, the Rotbier, get the rest of this guy out, the Rotbier is not a style that you come across all that often. I mean, I think I've maybe reviewed one or two of them on the channel over the 10 years that we've been going. But yeah, this is pretty interesting. Compared to the other Schlenkerla beers, this one is a lot more kind of dry into its aftertaste, and it doesn't quite have the sweetness that some of the other ones do. So and the Rotbier, from what I remember, is like it's quite a bready style. It's almost as if you take the breadiness that you have from, say, like a Helles or a Keller beer or something like that, and then, you know, just give it a wee bit more maltiness. It's almost like a cross between a Keller beer's breadiness and you know, like a Märzen's kind of sweetness, if you like, or an alt beer. The alt beer is probably a good comparison as well, come to think of it. Yeah, it's probably like a cross between a Keller beer and an alt beer to an extent, and you get that out of this one. So this is quite dry, actually, compared to the other Schlenkerlas that I've had, but still very, very nicely done beer, and gets a thumbs up from me. I do need to look into this Rotbier style a bit more from Nuremberg, because I don't know madly much about it. But this is a nice beer. I do like this one. So let's try and break this beer down then and describe it for you a little bit more in depth. So we'll start on the middle third of the palate. The base layer of this beer is absolutely the wood, and you can feel that the cherry wood, it actually feels, to me, it feels even drier than the beech wood. It does, to be honest with you. So you can feel that cherry wood base in there. It feels a bit brighter, but at the same time a little bit drier. As you go further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little touch of like almost, there's a very slight hint of vanilla in there, which is interesting. And then, so yeah, slight touch of vanilla in there, a little bit of a nuttiness coming out of it too. Then above that, you start to get the kind of bread crusty notes out of the beer. So the bread crusty character for me is like a toasty, well-fired bread crust of, say, yeah, it's like a slightly well-fired kind of pumpernickel-y bread crust, and then you've got two layers. It's almost got like there's almost like a slightly rye bready layer in there, like a more dense rye bready character. Then you get that brighter and sweeter pumpernickel layer on top of it, and the smoky character that this beer has is kind of embedded within those two bready layers, and it's got a wee bit of nuttiness to it as well. Yeah, that is pretty awesome, the way that this kind of just pieces together. I love this. I like beers, you know, when you've come across after 4,000 or so beer reviews, which is where we're at just now, You want beers that are going to test your palate a little bit and make you think styles you're not familiar with, and this beer really delivers on that. And this is, you know, you can tell it's a Schlenkerla, but it's just a wee bit different and makes you think about what's going on the brew sheet and stuff. But yeah, you've got the rye bready layer, the wholemeal, the sort of pumpernickel-y wholemeal brown bready layer. The smoke is kind of embedded into that, and above that you get a little bit of a toasty brown sugar and a very slightly leathery brown sugar as well. This beer is nowhere near as sweet as some of the other Schlenkerlas that you're going to get, like the Märzen, the Urbock, and the Aecht, for example. I don't even remember the Fasten beer being as dry as this one. But if you take a bigger gulp of this, you do get a little bit more sweetness out of it. I will add that as well. So yeah, there's a bit of toasty brown sugar in there, a bit of a more leathery brown sugar, then you get this little circle in the middle of your palate where it has a wee touch of like a Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing, and there's a bit of like biscuit in there as well, you know, like McVitie's digestive biscuity type character to the beer. So yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is really, really nice in this one. I think that's everything we really need to say about that middle third of the palate, and that's where the vast majority of the complexity in this beer is. So yeah, let's go to the back third of the palate. And as I say, generally speaking, with your palate, sweeter flavours will come out further forward, drier flavours will come out further back, and then the back third of your palate is going to give you a similar flavour profile to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities. So the border region between back third and between middle third and back third of your palate, there's a little bit of rye bread in the base and a bit more of that kind of wholemeal pumpernickel-y bread on top of that. You can feel the base of that back third of your palate is, of course, the woody character, which was a little bit more roasty and almost charred in a sense. You've got a bit of a crackery layer on top of that. Then you've got the rye bready layer, which feels a little bit, well, you've got the bread crust layer, I should say, as well, which feels even more well fired. Then you've got the rye bready layer, which feels a little bit lighter and more airy, and then the kind of pumpernickel wholemeal brown bready layer, which sits above that, which again is a little bit lighter and more airy, and you can feel some of the kind of toasty brown sugary layers just creeping over the top of that back third of your palate there, and that concludes the kind of malty aspect of the beer. But above everything else, on that back third of your palate, you've got the kind of yeasty side of the beer coming out. So for me, the yeasty side of this beer is quite interesting. Like, it's got this really dense and slightly sweeter, like wholemeal, pumpernickel-y, brown bready character. That's got a little bit of an almost kind of black peppery note around it, and it's got a little bit of a toasty kind of honeycomb type thing to it as well. And definitely on that back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is really quite nice. That concludes the malty yeasty side of the beer. On the hoppy side of things, it's kind of what you'd expect. In the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. I think the earthiness is a wee bit more prominent in this one compared to other Schlenkerlas. But as you come further forward, it's a wee bit more herbal, and then the herbal, earthy kind of thing gradually dissipates to give you more of a sort of floral, aromatic note out of the beer. So yeah, there's a little bit of floral aromaticity around there. Wouldn't surprise me if there's a bit of Northern Brewer in this, to be honest with you. And then round the front curve of the tongue, the beer is distinctly lighter and more kind of grassy, typical German noble qualities. But let's have a little look at the front third of your palate then, and just see what's on the fruity side of things. So yeah. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate with this beer, you get that nice little bit of bready build up again, rye bread in the base, wholemeal brown bread on top. Then the base of that front third of your palate, you get the toasty, you do get a little bit of the kind of you get a bit of the drier, woody character there. It feels a little bit more fruity. You get a little bit more fruitiness out of the wood there. But then, yeah, toasty, well-fired bread crust, the rye bread, the wholemeal brown bread with a bit of smoke in it. Then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. Yeah, so the fruity side of the beer then. Let's have a little look at this. Yeah, the fruity side of the beer, it's, you know, it's kind of what you'd expect. And the focus of this beer is, of course, not the fruit, but still. So at the back of that front third of your palate, where you get that nice oily bubble, you get a little bit of this, like, you do get a little bit of like sultana. You know, this one, you know, like white raisins or whatever you want to call them. So there's a wee touch of sultana to this beer. You could argue there's maybe a little bit of date or something, but yeah, as you move further forward, you've got a more kind of oily pear sort of thing. It's actually a very kind of dry pear, to be honest with you. And then as you move into the front half, kind of front half of that front third of your palate, it gives you more of a kind of like blackcurrant base, if you like. There's a little bit of that more kind of blackcurranty base in there too. So yeah, there's a little bit of a blackcurranty, fruity sort of thing, just on that that kind of front edge of your palate there. So yeah, a little touch of red fruity, red curranty, black curranty sort of thing, and it's quite a dry thing there. All the woody character and the smokiness from the wood pushes its way out underneath the fruity side of the beer too. So yeah, really interesting beer, this one. It really has tasted my palate, and I think it's nice. As I say, when I compare this to the other Schlenkerlas, this one is a little bit more, I think it's definitely drier. I think it's also got a little bit more bready character to it as well, and it's not quite as sweet, but that would be quite reflective of the kind of Rotbier style, if you like, actually. But yeah, I think we can round off this review then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So mouthfeel wise, I would say that this beer is, yeah, kind of top end, light bodied. The carbonation is really quite smooth in this one. It does have that typical German Brauhaus smoothness, as I would call it. There's just something about German beers that give you this smoothness. So yeah, that is definitely going on with this one. Lovely smoothness coming out of this beer, and yeah. In terms of the IBU and things like that in this one, you have to talk about perceived bitterness here and calculated bitterness. I think from the calculated bitterness side of things, it's probably only about 20 IBUs, which would probably be standard for most German lagers, but because of the dryness and the smokiness and stuff like that, it probably is perceived as a higher IBU. But yeah, the malty side of the beer, the woodiness that's in there, the dry, toasty, woody side of things is great. So that's the base. You've got the kind of more smooth, bready character in there, a little bit of a drier sweetness on top, and that lingers there. And yeah, the smokiness, the sort of meaty smokiness that you get out of these beers, like Milliard reactions, you know, kind of, you know, the little brown bits that you get on bacon and stuff like that. That's kind of what you're getting on the smoky side of things here. Then you've got that little bit of slightly oily but still quite dry, fruity character coming out of the beer too. But yeah, really interesting beer, this one. Cool to see Schlenkerla doing a different style that I've not really tried very many of before, and yeah, very much enjoyed this. So I think we can leave it at that for this review. I'm really happy with this one, and as I say, I need to look a little bit more into this pardon me, Nuremberger Rotbier style. But yeah, this was the Aecht Schlenkerla Weichsel, a Nuremberger style Rotbier aged on cherry wood, which really does change it quite a little bit actually, from Brauerei zum Helle Bamberg, also known more famously as the Schlenkerla Brewery in Bamberg in Franconia in northern Bavaria in Germany. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brauerei Bamberg as well, and we will see about returning to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until the next time, thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out Schlenkerla's social media, and I'll see you guys on the next review. And a big thank you once again to Matt of Massive Beer Reviews for giving me one of these bottles to review, because this is a brew that's very special to me, and yeah, I wanted to get this review kind of out there when the beer was released. Till the next time, Slange it, Skull, cheers, and I'll see you guys in the next one.